If we up her dosage slowly, she'll forget who she is by Christmas. The words were my daughter's. My knees buckled on the porch, the evening air suddenly sharp as glass. I was holding an envelope worth $21 million, my pulse thudding against it like a second heartbeat. I had come to surprise her, to say, "Here, Nora, let me ease your burdens." Instead, I heard my only child conspiring to erase me from existence. If you're watching this, subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from. Because sometimes, the most dangerous betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the voices you thought you'd never fear. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the doorbell. I turned away, my shoes crunching on the gravel like they were carrying someone else's body. Inside that envelope was the promise of comfort, the fruit of years working double shifts, clipping coupons, living modestly after my husband died. I had never cared for luxury. What I wanted was to see my family steady, safe. That night I realized they wanted me unsteady, unsafe, unseen. Back home, I set the envelope on the kitchen table. It looked ordinary: cream paper, a line of official ink, no hint of the storm it carried. Beside it lay my late husband's watch, still ticking quietly, the only constant in a life that had just splintered. On the wall hung a photograph of Nora as a little girl, grinning in Savannah's sunlight, freckles bright against her cheeks. I stared at that photo until the smile blurred. People think betrayal shatters the heart in one violent crack. But the truth is subtler. It tears, clean and slow, like fabric ripped down the seam. By the time I sat down with my cooling coffee, I already knew what I had to do. I ordered two things: a bottle of whiskey I never planned to drink, and a set of hidden cameras I fully intended to use. I installed them myself, one above the medicine cabinet, another in the kitchen molding, a third near the front door. Every lens winked back at me like a secret ally. They thought age made me invisible. But invisibility has its uses. As I tested the final angle, the camera light blinked red. A small, steady glow. It caught my reflection in the mirror. Tired eyes, a burning cheek where tears had dried, and the faint outline of the envelope on the table behind me. $21 million. A daughter's betrayal. A mother's silence sharpening into resolve. The envelope hadn't changed, but I had. 3 days later, I began my performance. I let the sugar sit untouched beside my coffee and stirred only cream, sipping it slowly, as though the taste had slipped from memory. At the grocery store, I greeted a neighbor by the wrong name. When my granddaughter's picture flashed on my phone, I called her by the cat's name instead. Small lapses, subtle enough to seem real. By the time Nora and her husband Jake came for Sunday dinner, I was ready. "Mom," Nora said, setting a casserole on the counter, "you're looking tired. Are you keeping up with your medications?" I smiled vaguely, letting my eyes drift toward the cabinet. "Sometimes I forget which bottle is which," I murmured. Her gaze flickered, just for a second, toward Jake. His hand brushed his pocket, a gesture almost invisible, but the cameras caught it. Later, while rinsing dishes, he paused at the cabinet. His fingers lingered on the handle before sliding a new bottle into place. A perfect substitution, if I hadn't been watching. I didn't touch it. That night, I emptied the capsules into a plastic bag, labeling it with the date. Evidence, not medicine. I returned the bottle to its shelf. Still full, still poisoned. The next morning, I deepened the act. I left the stove on low until smoke curled against the ceiling. When Jake stopped by to check on me, I fumbled at the papers he slid across the table. "Just routine authorizations," he said smoothly. "We want to take the burden off your shoulders." Nora added her practiced sweetness. Long-term care, Mom. Just so everything's easier for you. I tilted my head. Let confusion crease my brow. Burden? What burden? Her smile tightened. Jake's voice hardened. Just sign, Mother. It's better this way. We. I folded my hands, trembling deliberately, and whispered, I'll look at them later. That hesitation was enough to sour their smiles. Nora's manicured fingers tapped the table like knives against porcelain. Jake pressed his lips thin, the mask slipping for only a breath. They gathered the papers and left with clipped goodbyes. The door shut. My kitchen was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I sat perfectly still, heart pounding, until I heard the soft click from above, the camera saving another file. I wasn't weak. I wasn't gone. I was recording every shadow, every lie, every attempt to erase me. And soon, they would see the cost of underestimating me. They returned 4 days later, masks of politeness already fraying. Nora carried a pie. Her smile stretched thin. Jake held a manila folder, thicker than before. Mom, Nora began, setting the pie on the counter. We've been talking. You need to think about the future. These papers will help. She slid them toward me like a dealer with a rigged deck. On top, long-term care authorization. Below it, property transfer. Their boldness made my hands tighten around the edge of the table. Jake's tone sharpened. Sign them now, Mother. It's for your safety. I tilted my head, feigning confusion. What day is it today? Don't play games! Nora snapped. Her voice cracked like a whip, no longer sweet but jagged. I asked again, softly. Where's Emily? Why isn't she here? Her hand slammed the papers flat. Because she doesn't need to see this. When I didn't pick up the pen, her face twisted. Then, in a flash, her palm cracked across my cheek. The sound was sharp, hot, humiliating. Jake grabbed my shoulder, shoving me back into the chair. Pain shot up my spine. My hands trembled against the wood. For a moment, fear coiled in my stomach. They thought I would crumble, finally defeated. But then, the front door burst open. Step away from her. Officer Laura Grant stormed in, badge gleaming, hand resting on her holster. I remembered her as a child at my piano lessons, her fingers stumbling through scales. Now her eyes were steel. Nora paled. Jake's hands flew up, caught mid-shove. I sat perfectly still, cheek burning, while Laura's voice filled the room. I've seen enough. Out. Now. They stammered, sputtered, but the authority in her tone made them retreat, their confidence unraveling like cheap thread. The house grew quiet again, the only sound my heartbeat echoing in my ears. Laura crouched beside me, her voice softer now. Are you all right, Mrs. Bloom? I nodded slowly, my hands steadied, as I reached for the papers still on the table. They thought I wouldn't fight back, I whispered. They thought I was soft. Her gaze met mine, steady and knowing. They'll regret underestimating you. I traced the red mark on my cheek in the mirror later, not with shame, but with resolve. Behind me, the camera light blinked, saving every second of their violence. Proof, not weakness. Preparation, and the game had only just begun. That night I called Martha. 30 years of friendship had taught me she never missed a detail. When she arrived, glasses perched on her nose and yellow notepad in hand, I already had the folder spread across my kitchen table. They left this behind, I said, sliding the papers toward her, too confident to think I'd read them. She flipped through quickly, then slowed. Her pen tapped the corner of one page. This signature, she murmured. It's scanned, not written. See the pixelation around the curve of the R? My chest tightened. So it's forged. More than forged, Martha said. It's premeditated. I added the page to the growing binder. Inside were clear dividers, each labeled medical proxy, property transfer, power of attorney. I had started building a chain of evidence: intent, motive, method. The next morning, David Kessler, my lawyer, sat across from me. He had handled my husband's will years ago, and his eyes hardened as he read. They didn't just pressure you, he said flatly. They've been building this case for months. False diagnoses, delayed responses, fabricated hygiene notes. See here? He pointed to medical jargon I'd never heard of. These are from a physician who doesn't exist in your records. I felt the room tilt. So, they've created a history of decline that isn't real. Yes, David said. Enough to convince a court you're unfit. Martha scribbled furiously. And with those documents, plus your supposed signature, they could move you into a care facility. Quietly. Permanently. The word permanently landed like ice in my chest. I excused myself to the kitchen, pouring water just to keep my hands busy. The faucet hissed, steady, like the blood rushing in my ears. When I returned, David closed the folder gently. We'll need to secure everything. Originals, copies, timestamps. Start thinking about who else might corroborate your condition: doctors you've actually seen, neighbors, anyone who can testify. I nodded, the fear inside me solidifying into steel. Then, let's make sure the chain is unbreakable. Martha placed her hand over mine. We'll catch them in their own arrogance. That evening, I sat at my desk, arranging pages under the harsh glow of the lamp. Every forged line, every false date, slid into its place. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was curating a museum of their betrayal, exhibit by exhibit, until no one could deny what they had tried to erase. The binder closed with a snap. Outside, the night was quiet. Inside, my resolve was loud. By dawn, I knew silence would be my sharpest weapon. Not screaming, not begging, but quiet, precision. So I prepared 3 packages, each addressed to a different place: the state's Adult Protective Services Office, the ethics committee at Jake's engineering firm, and the managing partner at the law firm where Nora once clerked. Inside each envelope was the same collection: scanned copies of the forged documents, photos Martha had taken, and a USB drive with time-stamped video from my cameras. No accusations, no pleas, just the truth, cold and clinical. When I dropped them at the post office, the clerk glanced at me curiously. To her, I was just an older woman mailing paperwork. She didn't know those envelopes carried the first sparks of a fire that would consume my betrayers. The next step was quieter still. I uploaded a 4-minute video titled, When Family Fails You. Black and white footage, subtitles scrolling across the screen. No narration, just images. Jake slipping a new pill bottle into the cabinet, Nora placing papers in front of me, my hand trembling over a pen I never used, then a fade to words. Protect yourself before they rewrite your life. I didn't sign my name. I didn't need to. The ripple was immediate. 2 days later, Jake's company placed him on administrative leave pending investigation. A neighbor mentioned Nora's face had disappeared from the social calendar at the preservation board. At the country club, where she had fought so hard to climb, her name was suddenly absent from the committee roster. But I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with David, reviewing new drafts of legal protections. Every account resecured. Every proxy revoked. My property deed locked in a fireproof safe. David studied me as I signed. Most people crumble under betrayal like this. But you, he shook his head, with a thin smile. I don't need them to crumble, I replied. I need the record. I need proof that I matter. That evening, the phone rang. Martha's voice was hushed. Your video's circulating. Not just neighbors, strangers are sharing it in caregiving groups. One woman said she lost her house the same way, with no proof. She thanked you. I pressed the receiver tighter. My fight was no longer just for me. On the table, the binder of evidence sat open, the brooch from my husband resting beside it. Justice wasn't loud. Justice was methodical. And mine had only just begun. The calls started quietly. A woman named Deborah rang one afternoon, her voice trembling. Your video. It showed me I'm not alone. My mother lost her house last year the same way, signed papers she didn't understand. No cameras, no proof. They called her confused. She paused, voice breaking. I wish she'd had your courage. Her words echoed in my chest long after the line went dead. My fight was rippling outward, touching strangers who carried the same wounds. But Nora and Jake weren't finished. That week, a dark sedan appeared across the street. Every day, same time. Plates changed, but the model never did. The engine idled, always facing my porch. They didn't knock. They didn't get out. They just watched. I didn't panic. I added another camera, angled toward the street. Invisibility worked both ways. Then came the letter. A new law firm, aggressive in tone. Your actions constitute defamation. You are manipulating video evidence and damaging reputations. Cease immediately, or face countersuit. I brewed tea as I read it, the steam curling like smoke from a battlefield. David flipped through the pages later, unimpressed. This is desperation, he said. They're flailing. Still, desperation could be dangerous. That danger arrived in a jar. My spice drawer was ajar when I came home from the pharmacy. At first glance, nothing looked touched. But the chamomile tea bore a tiny smudge on its label, as if a fingerprint had pressed into wet ink. Suspicion prickled down my spine. I didn't drink it. I called Detective Grant. She came quietly that evening with a small team. No sirens, no uniforms, just steady efficiency. They photographed the drawer, collected the jar, dusted for prints. Grant placed a recorder on the counter. Tell me exactly what you saw, Mrs. Bloom. I described the smudge, the open drawer, the faint scent that didn't belong. She nodded, her face unreadable. 2 days later, her call confirmed it. The chamomile had been laced with the same sedative Jake had tried to substitute in my pills. The dosage matched, the manufacturer matched. The pattern was undeniable. I stood at the kitchen sink, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the row of jars. Cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, ordinary spices, now corrupted. The symbol of comfort turned into a weapon. They weren't just trying to erase me on paper. They wanted my body gone, too. And that meant the noose was tightening on them. The truth didn't arrive with trumpets. It flickered to life on a grainy bank camera. David spread the printouts across my dining table, each page stamped with the date and time. Watch the doorway, he said. I leaned in. Nora walked in first, shoulders squared, jaw set, followed by a woman roughly my height, hair tucked into a scarf. From behind, in bad lighting, the silhouette could have been mine. They stopped at the notary window. The clerk barely raised his eyes. A stamp thudded. Ink. Approval. Another thud. Permission to erase me. Pressed into paper by a stranger who couldn't be bothered to ask for proper ID. David tapped the margin. That's the notary's seal. He didn't verify a thing. He slid over a still frame. The imposter turned just enough to catch the camera. Wrong cheekbones, wrong mouth. This is how your signature got on the transfer. I felt my throat go tight. Not with grief this time, but with purpose. She choreographed it, I said. Every beat. Then we conduct the counterpoint, David replied. 2 days later, the district attorney's office called. The voice on the line was clipped, professional, and beneath it, satisfied. Jake had requested a meeting. He'd walked in with his attorney and a folder of printed texts. He flipped. The transcript arrived that afternoon. I read every line, each message a loose board on Nora's scaffold. Nora. Poe template. Find a version that looks official. Remove the date stamp. Jake. Which pills? Nora. Same manufacturer. Blister pack. She won't notice. Nora. Say for her safety, if she hesitates. My hands didn't shake. I set the pages down and listened to the DA's summary. Jake described the bottle swap, the scripted phrases, the plan to push a memory assessment through a cooperative physician. He called it protection. The DA called it what it was: fraud, conspiracy, elder, abuse. News travels faster than shame. By morning, the local paper ran a headline too big for its column. Beloved youth advocate, under investigation for forgery, elder abuse. A photo of Nora beamed beside the text, her smile suddenly misaligned with the words. In the grocery store, 2 women whispered in the produce aisle, lemons turning in their hands. On the club bulletin board, the gala committee list was freshly printed, her name absent. The blank space louder than a firing squad. Former colleagues began to murmur. Strange reimbursements. Vanished meeting notes. We were told not to ask. Reputation, once her armor, became her indictment. I did not gloat. I brewed tea I did not drink, and watched sunlight move across the countertop, slow and indifferent. The cameras were quiet now, their red eyes resting. I had enough. That afternoon, David arrived with one more envelope, a copied deposition, signed and notarized correctly this time. He didn't sit. He didn't need to. The wall is closing, he said. After he left, the house fell back into its careful quiet. I opened the top drawer of my desk to place the transcript inside and found an unexpected letter cream paper. Steady hand. Emily. I believe you, Grandma. I'm sorry. I moved out for a while. I needed space to think. Please don't worry about me. I'm safe. I just wanted you to know. I see everything now. The words blurred. I pressed the page to my chest and let the ache move through me like weather. Not a storm, just rain finally reaching a dry field. They had counted on the world refusing to see me. But my granddaughter did. And that single clear sentence weighed more than any headline, any stamp, any seal. They wanted me invisible. Emily made me undeniable. They came back dressed in politeness, as if costumes could erase scars. Nora carried a casserole dish, still warm from the oven. Jake wore a suit jacket, his tie just a little too tight. Their smiles were brittle, stretched across faces already cracking. Mom, Nora said, her voice sugary. We've been thinking. It's time to put the past behind us. I gestured toward the chairs at the kitchen table. Sit. If that's what you want to talk about, let's talk. Jake set down a bottle of wine, his tone falsely cheerful. We should focus on family, unity. The holidays are coming. Unity. The word tasted like ash. I nodded slowly, pretending to buy their performance. Unity is important. So tell me, what exactly do you want? The pause betrayed them. Nora's eyes flicked toward Jake, who slid a stack of papers across the table. Property deeds, guardianship forms, legal jargon, masquerading as reconciliation. This is just to make things easier, Nora said too quickly. So you don't have to worry about the burden of paperwork. I traced my finger along the top page. Durable medical proxy. The exact phrase Martha had underlined weeks before. So, you'd like to take care of me, I said softly. Nora leaned forward, desperate. Exactly. We just want to help. I smiled, calm, cold, funny. Help feels an awful lot like control. Her mask slipped. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Jake's smile faded into steel. You're not well, Mother. Everyone sees it. Sign the papers, and we'll handle things. It's the best option for all of us. The cameras hidden in the molding caught every word. I tilted my head, feigning confusion. What if I say no? Nora's voice sharpened. Then you'll force us to take other steps. I let the silence hang heavy. Then I pushed the papers back toward them. Steady and deliberate. Take your casserole, take your wine, and take your lies. Out of my house. For a moment, neither moved. Then Nora stood abruptly, the casserole dish rattling against the counter. You'll regret this, she hissed. Jake's jaw tightened. He gathered the papers, stuffing them back into his folder. You're making a mistake, he said. Low and dangerous. I rose, my voice calm as glass. Number? I'm correcting one. They left with forced dignity, the slam of the door betraying their rage. I stood in the quiet kitchen, the blinking light of the hidden camera, recording proof of their failed performance. The casserole still steamed on the counter, untouched. I slid it into the trash. Some offers of kindness rot faster than food. The country club's ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and polished silver. Nora stood at the microphone, her voice smooth, rehearsed. She spoke of legacy and family, words dripping with false virtue. Jake hovered beside her, nodding dutifully like a marionette on strings. I sat alone near the back, my chair angled toward the exit. My brooch, my late husband's gift, gleamed against my navy dress. The same brooch I wore the night I first walked away from their door. Nora's words swelled. Honoring the women who raised us. That was the cue. The ballroom doors swung open. 2 plainclothes officers strode inside, calm and certain. Gasps fluttered through the crowd. One officer approached Jake, the other Nora. Jacob Wells, Nora Wells, you're under arrest. The bracelets clicked. Metal against bone. Nora's painted smile cracked. What is this? Some mistake. But the murmurs of the audience drowned her protest. Reputations don't shatter loudly. They crumble in whispers. Jake's face drained of color. He didn't resist. He looked at Nora once, then lowered his head. And then, out of the shadows, Emily appeared. She had been waiting behind the stage curtains, her small frame dwarfed by the velvet drapes. She walked forward, her voice carrying across the stunned silence. My grandmother saved me. Her words pierced the hush like a bell. Heads turned. A few guests gasped. Others simply froze. Nora sagged as if struck. Emily came to me, slipping her hand into mine. Her grip was steady, fierce, more certain than the voices around us. Together, we sat while the officers led Nora and Jake out through the side doors. The room held its breath. No applause, no whispers. Only silence thick enough to taste. For once, Nora's kingdom of reputation had no audience left to defend her. I raised my chin, my voice calm. Family isn't built on paper. It's built on truth. No one answered. They didn't need to. The scene had spoken for itself. Later, as I left the ballroom, my shoes echoed against the marble. Outside, The night air was cool, scented with pine. Emily leaned into me, her voice small but steady. "Grandma, it's over, isn't it?" I looked down at her, brushing a curl from her forehead. "For them, maybe. For us, it's just beginning." At home, I placed the Navy folder on my lawyer's desk the next morning. The folder that held every copy, every clip, every timestamp. "It's time," I told David. And this time, I wasn't speaking of survival. I was speaking of victory. 2 weeks after the arrests, the house was quiet again. The cameras had been removed. Not because I was naive, but because I no longer felt watched. My walls were mine, my breath unmeasured. On the kitchen table lay the envelope, the same one I had carried to Nora's door weeks ago. $21 million. Back then, it had felt like a gift, a blessing I longed to share. Now it was something sharper, proof of what they had tried to erase and what they had failed to take. I slid it into my purse and drove downtown to David's office. The red brick building was unassuming, tucked between a florist and a dentist, yet inside it smelled of paper, ink, and justice. David greeted me with a nod. No words wasted. I placed the envelope and the deed to my house before him. "This is no longer for Nora," I said evenly. "It's for others like me." By afternoon, the Franklin Fund was born, named after my mother, a woman who had raised 4 children on a factory wage. Its mission: to protect elders from coercion, to provide legal aid when family turns predator. The money became not an inheritance, but a shield, forged from betrayal into purpose. That evening, Martha brought lemon bars and sat beside me on the porch. Emily curled on the other side, sketching in her notebook. For the first time in years, I felt something like peace, a quiet, not born of fear, but of freedom. "Grandma," Emily asked softly, "will Mom ever come home?" I looked out across the garden, where marigolds bloomed bright against the fading sun. "Home," I said, "isn't a place you inherit. It's a place you build. And right now, your mother has to build hers somewhere else." Emily nodded, eyes glistening. She didn't argue. She understood more than her age should allow. Days later, I visited Nora at the detention center. The room was pale, sterile, smelling of antiseptic. She sat stiffly, hands folded, eyes hollow. For a long time, we said nothing. Finally, I spoke. "You plan to erase me. But look at me now." Her lips trembled. "It wasn't about the money." "Then what was it?" I pressed. "You made me feel invisible," she whispered. "Like I had to be perfect, or I was nothing." I let the words hang. Perhaps they were true. Perhaps they were excuses. But I had carried guilt too long to take hers back on my shoulders. "I forgive you," I said quietly. "But forgiveness isn't a door back into my life. It's a door out of my anger." As I left, I saw her clutching Emily's letter, her only tether to the world she had shattered. Back home, I opened the cedar box on my dresser. Inside lay the brooch, the photograph from Savannah, and the envelope. I held it one last time before placing it under the Franklin Fund's charter documents. The envelope hadn't changed, but I had. This time, I was the one closing the door. If this story gave you strength, subscribe, share it, and tell me your own story in the comments. So that's the truth of how betrayal almost destroyed everything, until silence and strength turned the story around. But there's one thing I didn't tell you at the start. What if the betrayal wasn't just about money, but about love, power, and a secret no one expected? Click on this video here if you want to hear the next story of family, betrayal, and revenge. I'll see you in the next one.